This plenary is framed around sleep, but to be honest, I could really frame it around. Frame it around getting my slides to move, perhaps. I could frame it around performance-enhancing drugs, because that's really how I describe sleep. And it's how I described it to Joseph Schooling when I first met Joe back in 2016 at Texas State. I was sent up there to characterize Joe's sleep. And the great famous coach, Eddie Reese, grabbed me by the ear and he pulled me up in front of all the boys and he said, can you please explain to everybody what you're doing here with Joe? And I said, well, the truth is, I've come all the way from Singapore to start Joe on a performance-enhancing drug. And, there's about 12 Olympians in the squad and they all look at me and they're like, Canola, what? And I said, Can. I'm very comfortable with this drug. It's freely available on the market. You can get as much of it as you want. In fact, I'm trying to get Joe to overdose on this drug. And it has amazing side effects such as enhanced recovery, improved performance, and it just makes you happy. You just can't help but smile. And of course, I'm talking about drug ZZZ. There we go. Okay, nice. Yeah, so this wonderful drug that is sleep, we've just had an awesome presentation from Haresh describing the wonders of sleep. It really is as close as we can get to miracles and magic, and we get really close to that for 6 to 8 hours, ideally. The top end of that every night. Okay, it's where children learn about language and grammar. They don't even know what grammar is, but they learn the intricacies of language and grammar when they sleep. Our brains flood with cerebrospinal fluid and wash away the day's fatigue. We release testosterone, we release growth hormone, we grow and develop and repair. It really just is a wonder process that I'm totally in love with and really passionate about sharing, as is Shona and Haresh. And we heard too from Shona about the importance of sleep as a fundamental behaviour for athletes to engage with, to understand and respect. This really could be David Pocock's training plan, right? He prioritises sleep as much as he does training. It's central to his training program. And for the coaches in the audience, I'm sure you notice when your athletes don't turn up to training at all, or they turn up late, and you're tracking their numbers, right? You want to know the power output, the wattage, the distance, the load. You want to know all of that. Well, I guess I'm going to just stand here and try and convince you to get interested in understanding their sleep as much as you understand their training, because athletes basically train when they sleep. We know that when athletes sleep more, they get fitter, faster, stronger, and more powerful. Okay, so we as a country, for the man on the street and for the development athlete and the elite athlete, we need to get interested in how our athletes are sleeping, because it is a problem here. I'm reminded of this quote by the famous Austrian neurologist Viktor Frankl. Okay, let's read that to you, because it could be hard from the back. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Okay, so if training is the stimulus, that's the doorbell, that's sending a signal to the body saying, you know what, in that session you really sucked. You weren't fit enough, strong enough, fast enough, more powerful enough. Okay, and it puts together a cascade of processes to make you fitter, faster, stronger, and more powerful next time, right? So that is adaptation, that's the response. So in between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. And that space, of course, is sleep, right? And in our sleep, we literally grow, okay? And the freedom for athletes is to be able to optimize their physical and mental performance and step onto that big stage, that big show, and show everybody, what they can do. That's their freedom. And sleep can truly empower that. This guy understood the space really well, purportedly a really good sleeper, 8 to 10 hours. And I love this quote. He talks about how sleep, literally helped him absorb his training. And I love this quote, and I pull it out all the time. And for the young coaches, because sleep is an extraordinarily complex thing, and if you really just want to break it down to something very simple and visual for an athlete, this is a great little way to do that. And you can just represent the human body with a glass or a dish, right? And you can get your sweat bottle, okay, and you can literally pour blood, sweat, and tears into this container or glass. Okay, this is the body and this is the training, right? And with training comes fatigue. So what was light is now very heavy, and when people are filled up with fatigue and they need to sleep, they have heavy eyelids, don't they? Some of us can relate to having a heavy mood when we're underslept, and that's a next day effect. You're just a grumpy person, right, when you haven't had a lot of sleep. Athletes describe having heavy legs. Okay, we've probably all heard athletes say, man, my legs are just not moving today. They're really heavy, okay? And so if we take a typical Singaporean sleep time of about 6.5 hours, that's like having a little sponge, all right? And, as Usain Bolt described, sleep's purpose is to help try and absorb that fatigue. Okay, so we're absorbing a little, but we're not absorbing enough. Okay, most of us need more than 6.5 hours of sleep. Sleep is very individual. There'll be people in this room that do great on 6 hours. I talked with somebody yesterday who was getting even less than that and felt amazing. All right, so it is very individual. Okay, but let's consider pumping that up a little bit. Let's talk about an 8-hour sleep, or even maybe like a 9-hour sleep. Okay, and we put that into the body, and suddenly we really start Usain Bolting it. We start really absorbing that sleep-induced fatigue, that training-induced fatigue. Okay, and everything lightens up, and when the body's light, that's when it can really move, and that's when you really get some traction around our training-induced adaptation. Okay, now there's still something in the bag. Okay. And so I guess in Singapore, we have athletes who are literally getting crushed by sleep debt. The brain is a very clever accountant. It's tracking how much sleep you're getting versus how much sleep you need, and it's working out the difference, and it's keeping track of that. And we call that sleep debt. And it's literally crushing a lot of our athletes. And so our jobs as sports scientists and as young coaches as well is to really help our athletes, lift some of that sleep debt, soak it up, remove it, and, put them in a place where, in a sleep extended space, they can literally fly. Okay, that's what we want to do. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we've heard already that we can understand sleep really well. We can understand it qualitatively. There's a bunch of different questionnaires out there. Through my doctorate, I used one called the PSQI, which I really liked, and that generated a global score, and you can put your athlete into one of two buckets, either a poor sleeper or a good sleeper, and it's really well published. We have all these wearables that Shona described, from Garmin, Fitbit, etc., through to better validated actigraphy watches. And then, we can really dive deep and accurate with polysomnography. These stickers I was looking at that picture that you showed, Shona, they must be ticklish or something, because all athletes have a big stupid grin on their face when they're wearing these things. But, they're not overly practical, are they? We certainly don't have one at the Singapore Sport Institute. Unless Frankie Chief, we might be able to work on that. But so what we can do is take a deeper dive on a tool that I'm using with our elite swim program here in Singapore called Fatigue Science. I thought I'd just share with you a couple of stories really about how I've used it and some wonderful experiences that I've had with this technology. And as we heard yesterday from John, sensational delivery, and there's so much that we can learn from the military, and this particular technology comes from the US Army, generated over 25 years off the back of some very clever research. And as John intoned, when you're throwing yourself out of a plane at 10,000 feet and you can't breathe and you're wearing 70 kilograms worth of equipment, you really want to understand your fatigue state, and this technology was designed to really try and do that. And also with transport drivers as well. Okay, so what they did was they constructed a bunch of different experiments, but essentially they gave people different amounts of sleep, different sleep doses, so 3, 5, 7, and 9 hours. And then at those different doses, they gave them different cognitive tests to assess and evaluate their reaction times and their concentration and their focus, etc. And what they were able to do was generate this biomathematical fatigue model, basically a fatigue predictive algorithm, which is overlaid over the individual circadian rhythm. We all have our own unique circadian rhythm. And we can see with reasonable accuracy where in the day an athlete is going to be super alert and when they're going to be, super dopey. Okay. So it's essentially an accelerometer. So when we're awake in the day, we're moving around, and it's picking that movement up at about 30 bytes per second. All right, and then when we're asleep, obviously we're very still, and so the model, the algorithm, can discern your sleep time versus your wake time, and it can also interpret how fragmented your sleep is, and from that we can understand your sleep quality. So when the athlete wakes up in the morning, they get a really nice picture on their phone, really nice dashboard. So they get their cognitive score. This is basically a score of how well their brain is working. All right, out of 100, it's called a effectiveness score, and they can see how they're going to track through the day in terms of alertness and sleepiness, and they can have a look at their night as well. So they can see their sleep time and their wake time, how many hours they got, and how much bleed time they had as well through the night through awakenings. So you can see this athlete here woke up quite a bit actually. So the yellow is where they slept, and the gaps are where they woke up. And that's actually quite a common picture in athletes. So I can use this in just a nice, gentle way with athletes to help them understand, how they're sleeping now, and then we can go away and change a few things and have a look at the knock-on effect. So this is a screenshot of one of my swimmers. Let's call him Swimmer X. And he was having a bunch of trouble staying asleep. His sleep quality was really quite poor, as you can see. And so we worked through a little bit of a list of sleep hygiene aspects, and it turns out his room was really bright. He had a very light curtain. He had quite a bright outside area, a lit-up HDB kind of environment. And so we got some blackout curtains. And being a dietitian, I couldn't help but squeeze some berries in there. So we lifted his anthocyan and antioxidant intake as well, which just settles down secondary inflammation and cytokine expression. And we had a real, and this was about 2 or 3 nights later. We had a really nice impact on his sleep quality, and he was just totally blown away. He texted me about 5 times on this particular day. He just couldn't believe the impact that just making his room really black so he couldn't see his hand, what impact that had. Another nice story, when I show people this picture, most people look at this guy here, all right, but I want you to pan left and take in this rather extraordinary young man here, Darren Chua, or DC as he's affectionately called. What I'm about to tell you, I have DC's permission to do so, okay, but this was taken at the Asian Games this year. DC anchored our 4x100 free relay, but, DC's had a rather hard year. It turns out that he has a very funny nose, and he doesn't breathe very well at night, at least he didn't, and he was effectively strangling himself about 22 times a night. Restricting oxygen delivery to his brain, and then of course his brain wakes him up in a crisis state because the brain doesn't like to be starved of oxygen. So the coaches were telling me that DC was chronically under-recovered. He just had no pop, when he came up off his underwater phase. His stroke rate was really poor. He just didn't look good in the water. And then when we looked at his anthropometric measures, he had what we would call failure to thrive for a young man who should have as much testosterone and growth hormone in his body as a bodybuilder. He hadn't grown at all in the previous 12 months. He had not grown taller, he had not put on any muscle mass. If you looked at him actually, he didn't even really look like an athlete. And of course his sleep quality was really, really poor. And so when he started wearing the Fatigue Science ActiWatch, we started collecting data on him. And this is early on when he started wearing it, and you can see just how poor his sleep was. So, you know, his sleep quantity averaged between sort of 4 and 5 hours. He had one day here in this shot where he got to sleep in a little bit more. And you can see how fragmented his night is. He's just waking up all the time on this particular Wednesday. And you remember that effectiveness score that I talked to you about, okay? You can see that it's really not great. There's no green in here. It's all yellow and red. All right, so he's really, really tired. He's really, really struggling through the day. And the nice thing about Fatigue Science is that it correlates fatigue with reduced reaction times. Okay, so you can see that, you know, his average safety score or effectiveness score was about 73 through the day. So, you know, automatically on the starting block he's 34% slower. That's about 0.2 seconds slower. So when everyone else has taken off, he's kind of still standing there. All right, and you can also see the blood alcohol equivalence, and this has been well validated in university studies. So when you're at a certain fatigue level, it is the same as being a certain drunk level. Okay, so it's no different to me really having gone up to DC on the deck and giving him a can of beer and, you know, and handing it to him and saying, you know, DC, drink up. Here's to 8 hours sleep a night. I've always wanted to do that. Yeah. And you know, that's the sticky moment, really, isn't it? That's like, did Ricky just do that? He just hit the beers on stage, right? And I hope that was a little bit shocking because you know, at least a third of our athlete population here are walking around in a drunk state. You think about how ready they are to perform. Not very ready, right? And that's validated. That's no joke. It's very, very serious. So now, not many people know this, but Marcus, is Marcus here? Oh, he's not here. Oh, he is here? No, he's not here. Good. Okay. So Marcus played football as a young boy, and actually had a go at goalie. Now, is this going to work? Ah, yes. Yeah. Marcus played drunk, right? So a big impact on reaction times when we're in a sleep and fatigue state. Okay. So, you know, good old DC. I've got 1 minute left to round out DC's story. He started CPAP therapy, continuous positive airway pressure therapy. So he was blowing air down his airway through the night, and for the first time in a very, very long time, getting oxygen to his brain through the night. He wasn't waking up as much. He was sleeping longer. He started growing again. He got a little bit bigger. Okay, and you know, I love this quote. It's where all the good stuff happens. He was just really embracing a good night's sleep, and you know, he literally started flying. So this is the final of the 4x100. DC brought it home, and he swam quicker as well. Now that's not all down to sleep. That's down to a whole bunch of other things and the team around the team. But it's no coincidence that, you know, here's a young athlete who started sleeping better, entered a better state of health, and started performing better. So, you know, my wish today is that you know, we all get on this drug. Hashtag drug ZZZ, right? Let's start dosing our athletes up on it, and let's see what that can do for us. So yeah, thank you very much.